and has the people that are charged with enforcing it and all that kind of stuff, then they probably should be given some deference. They have the experience and all of that. Are there times in the past where that has not been done well? Yeah, there are. You know, I don't know if the answer is to take away that deference. I mean, that's, you know, I think that would probably create a whole different set of problems. I think the reason for the deference, though, honestly, was because anytime you go to a judge, right, a circuit judge or an appellate judge or anybody else, they may or may not have had any experience in this subject matter, right? The judge you go before on an environmental matter could have been a state attorney prosecuting crimes, and he, you know, very capable lawyer, just not his area, right? The point of the deference, I think, was it kept judges from making some kind of wild stuff. They knew, okay, well, unless it's just crazy, you need to kind of stay with the agency. That was sort of the point of it, and I think the thought behind it. Okay, so this is amendment, make sure I got my numbers right. That's amendment 6. So if you vote yes on amendment 6, you're going to add all of the victim rights set out in pages 15, 16, and 17. You're going to change the mandatory retirement age for judges from 70 to 75, and you're going to change the interpretation, the deference given to administrative agencies. You're going to take away that deference. So a yes vote does all those things. A no vote leaves it the way it is for all those things. Now, that's a good example of what I was saying before, where they pack a whole bunch of stuff into one amendment that really doesn't relate much to each other.
They know people aren't gonna read it.
Yeah.
They know people aren't gonna read it all the way through.
Yeah.
That.
All right, so let's move on to number 7. Okay, and this is another good example of just that. If you take on page 20, page 21, where it starts full text, Article 9, education, all of that is already in there, what's not underlined. You start on page 21 through 22, that's what they're going to add to Article 9. That deals with the state college system. If you look at Article 10, down starting on page 22 and going through page 23, that's what they're going to add to Article 10, and it deals with a death benefit to Florida National Guard, law enforcement, emergency management, all of that. I don't know how they thought that had anything to do with one another, but that's what you got. So if you start on, so let's take the Article 9 first. And it's 2 parts here. One is under E, fees, which begins on page 22. Any proposal or action of constituent university. So that's not North Florida Community College. That's going to be Florida State, Florida, USF, all that. Any proposal or action of constituent university to raise, impose, authorize any fee as authorized by law must be approved by at least 9 affirmative votes on the members of the Board of Trustees of the constituent university, if approval by the Board of Trustees is required by general law, and at least 12 affirmative votes of the members of the Board of Governors, if approval of the Board of Governors is required by law. A fee under this subsection shall not include tuition. So like we did with the taxes, they said it had to be 2/3. This is kind of the same thing, but at the college level. Dealing with fees, but not tuition. Section 8. Now this is it's kind of an organizational change for the state college system. Now when it talks about state college system, it's talking about what we used to call community colleges and junior colleges, right? Like right now, I think, what is Lake City is now Gateway State College or something. They've changed those all over. Anyway, Section 8A, purposes. In order to achieve excellence and to provide access to undergraduate education, etc., they established the system of governance for the state college system of Florida. B, state college system. There shall be a single state college system comprised of all public, community, and state colleges. So that's what we used to call community colleges. Yes, sir.
Does this mean they're creating a new boards?
Yes. Yeah, and they're, well, what they're doing is, I think more than that, they're pulling it out from under DOE and kind of locking in what they've got, which is, if you look at B, there should be a single state college system, etc. A local board of trustees shall govern each state college system institution, and the state board of education shall supervise the state college system. So they're saying that's not going to be like the university system. University system, like FSU has a board of trustees, and then there's a board of, what do they call it, board of regents above that, and then above that you get to the State Board of Education, and it's different. They're saying here, and all that's set out by statute, as far as I know. There's no constitutional provision saying that has to be that way. What they're gonna do here is they're gonna say the state college system will be the local board of trustees under the State Board of Education. And now it used to be, when I started practicing, the State Board of Education was the governor and cabinet, but it's not that way anymore. The governor appoints a true State Board of Education. Okay, local boards of trustees. So this is C. Each state college system institution shall be governed by a local board of trustees, etc. And that doesn't change much from the way they do it now. Look at D. The State Board of Education shall supervise the state college system as provided by law. So it's kind of solidifying that system in the local board of trustees under the State Board of Education. All right, so now that's the first part of this. The second part of this is, we go to Article 10, death benefits for survivors of first responders and military members. A death benefit shall be paid by the employing agency when a firefighter, paramedic, emergency medical technician, law enforcement officer, correctional officer, or a member of the Florida National Guard while engaged in the performance of their official duties is, number one, accidentally killed or receives accidental bodily injury which results in the loss of an individual life, provided such killing is not the result of suicide and such bodily injury is not intentionally self-inflicted. Two, unlawfully or intentionally killed or dies as a result of such unlawful or intentional act or is killed while during active duty. That's A. B. A death benefit shall be paid by funds from general revenue when an active duty member of the United States Armed Forces is. And then we go into the same thing there. Now C. Okay. A and B are if they're killed in the line of duty or they receive injuries in the line of duty that result in their death. So if you got shot or something and then it took a long time to die, yeah, that all qualifies. So that's A, provides that benefit for firefighter, paramedic, EMS, etc. B provides that benefit for active duty members of the U.S. Armed Forces. Sir?
The operative word in there, though, is employed.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Which means compensated for. Correct? In other words, no volunteers would fall under this.
Yeah, it does. No, yeah, it doesn't seem to. It doesn't seem to. But that's one of the issues, though. When you're looking at this, because if they're killed while on duty, they're going to get a workers' comp benefit, right? See, right now you've got workers' comp. So what's that actually going to do? Is it going to increase that comp, or is it going to take the place of that comp benefit? I don't know the answer. And I do know that with volunteer firemen that are killed in the line of duty, they are covered under state workers' comp. And the reason is because frankly, it's very difficult legally to figure out that benefit. Because see, normally you figure out that benefit based upon the salary that the person had. Well, a volunteer doesn't have any salary with the county. And so you got to figure out, well, what was their salary while all this was going on from other places. And it's just, thank God we've only had to do that, I think, maybe once or twice while I've been here. Anyway, so that's A and B. Now when we get to C, and this is on page 23, if a firefighter, paramedic, EMS, law enforcement, correctional probation officer, active duty member of the National Guard, U.S. Armed Forces is accidentally killed as specified in A1 and B1, or unlawful and intentionally killed as specified in A2 and B2, the state shall waive certain educational expenses that the child or spouse of the deceased first responder or military member incurs while obtaining a career certificate, an undergraduate education, or a postgraduate education. So they're going to waive some tuition, that sort of stuff. Now, D, the eligible first responder must have been working for the state of Florida or any of its political subdivisions or agencies at the time of death. So that goes to your point again. An eligible military member must have been a resident of the state, or his or her duty post must have been within the state at the time of death. The legislature shall implement this section by general law. And of course, the legislature would have to, because you got a lot of unanswered questions with that. It says that you're going to pay a death benefit. Well, is that $5 or is it $10 million? I mean, somebody's got to figure that out. right? So anyway, again, this is number 7. If you vote yes on number 7, you're gonna add the restriction on raising university fees, unless you've got that super majority on page 21. You're gonna lock in the Board of Trustees for the state college system and the fact that they're under the Board of Education. You're gonna add a death benefit for first responders, active duty military, whether they're killed accidentally or intentionally while they're in the line of duty. And then you add a waiver of educational expenses for the spouse or child of those groups. Does that all make sense? Anybody got any questions? So if it doesn't get over 60%, none of that happens. You know, if you get over 60%, it's all added to the Constitution. All right, now number 8 on 24 and 25. And you'll see at the top, that one's been removed by the Supreme Court, and that was dealing with education, and they ruled on that before the ballots were printed, so you're not even gonna have that on your ballot.
No number 8.
No number 8, it's gonna skip from 7 to 9, Tommy, correct? So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on that one. All right, now, number 9. This is, and you can see the ballot title prohibits offshore oil and gas drilling, etc. So this one, to show you again how far they can take one amendment and stretch it to 2 different things. On the page 26 and 27, we talk about, this is Article 2, Section 7, Natural Resources, Scenic Beauty. We're gonna add, if this passes, you'll add paren C, to protect the people of Florida and their environment. Drilling for exploration or extraction of oil or natural gas is prohibited on lands beneath all state waters which have not been alienated and that lie between the mean high water line and the outermost boundary of the state territorial seas. This prohibition does not apply to transportation of oil and gas products produced outside such waters. This subsection is self-executing. All right, so that means when they talk about the mean high water line, if you own a house on the beach, right? You own a house, what you own is up to that mean high water line. Your deed may say you own 500 yards out in the ocean, but you don't own it. That mean high water line is where the state or the federal government owns that property, right? That's why if you can spend $10 million on a beach house, but people walking at the edge of the water can walk right in front of your beach house. You can't keep them out because that's public land, right? So what they're saying is between that mean high water line and the extent of our territorial waters, I'm sorry to say I don't remember what that is. I think it's 5 miles out. That we will prohibit drilling for oil or gas or exploration for oil or gas in that area. So they would not be able to explore, would not be able to drill, etc. Now that is a state prohibition. Of course, if Exxon talks to Congress and passing a law saying we can't do that, then you can't, but it would solidify up that our state legislature would not be able to authorize that, right? Okay, so that's the first part of number 9. Next part of number 9, we start on page 27. This is and if you look at section 20, this is the prohibition that went in several years ago dealing with tobacco. So in workplaces, you can't smoke cigarettes anymore, right? What they're doing is they're adding vaping to that, which, maybe somebody may know about this better than I do, but vaping is supposedly, it's electric and you breathe in the steam or whatever, and it's supposed to be different than cigarette smoking. I don't know anything about it. But I know it looks like they're smoking a cigarette, you know, they have the same kind of look. But anyway, what this does, Article 10, Section 9, deals with vaping, and it extends that prohibition on smoking to vaping. Right now, you can't smoke cigarettes in your workplace. Even if your boss wants to allow it, you cannot do that. Same thing with, if this passes, that same thing would happen with vaping. All right? And so, again, if you vote yes on 9, if that passes, that prohibits oil drilling in state waters, drilling or exploration in state waters, and it adds vaping to what is prohibited by the tobacco ban. All right. Now, okay. Now the next one, this number 10, is a little, I mean, it's spread out among a lot of pages, but it doesn't, there's not a lot of change here. It's page 31 through 37, right? So the first part of it is on page 31, and this, I would consider this probably more a housekeeping measure. This is dealing when the legislature starts its regular session. They're gonna change that from the first Tuesday after the first Monday in January in March, to the second Tuesday after the first Monday in January. I don't know that matters much to regular people, but, you know, it doesn't matter much to me. But anyway, that's the thought is, I think they think they can get started earlier and maybe get more stuff done.
Maybe done quicker than be able to go
Or
home.
maybe get done quicker and go home.
Not bloody like.
All right, so that's the first part. The next part is Article 4, dealing with the executive. And again, on page 33, so all the stuff that's not underlined is there now. If this passes, we're gonna add the stuff that's underlined. This is the Office of Domestic Security and Counterterrorism is created with the Department of Law Enforcement. The Office of Domestic Security and Counterterrorism shall provide support to prosecutors and federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies that investigate or analyze information relating to attempts or acts of terrorism or that prosecute terrorism, and shall perform any other duties as provided by law. You know, that, it makes that division is now solidified in the Constitution. It has to be there. I don't know what they're doing now. I assume there's some division, and Florida Department of Law Enforcement does that now. Okay. Next page on 34, Department of Veterans Affairs. Now this one, it's what it used to say was, the legislature by general law may provide for the establishment of the Department of Veterans Affairs. The change says the legislature by general law shall provide for the Department of Veterans Affairs. The head of the department now is the governor and cabinet. So it's solidifying it again. It's not optional to the legislature has to do it. Okay, and then at the bottom of page 34, maybe a little more complicated. If you look, now this is dealing with Article 8, which concerns local government, counties and cities, right? Now, in Florida, with counties and cities, what used to be the case was with counties, that counties all had that, you know, traditionally when you would start out, you would have municipal services and county services, right? So a county service would be like grading your road, providing a jail, providing a courthouse, courts, all that kind of stuff. Municipal services, which you would normally have gotten from a city, would have been things like curbside trash collection, a full-time fire department, you know, dog catchers, all that kind of stuff, right? What has happened in Florida, and the law is kind of is catching up to this, is now we really don't have people that want to live in a county and not have municipal services, and live in a city and have municipal services. We have people that want to get their municipal services from the city, or we have people that want to get their municipal services from the county. But if I live 20 miles out of town, if I call 911, I want the deputy there in 5 minutes, just like I lived in downtown, right? And so that's what is going on here. So what they did was, it used to be with municipalities, that municipalities would have a charter, right? And they still do. The municipality would have a charter, and that charter is like their mini constitution. It says what they can and can't do. In the late 60s, in that realm of the 68 Constitution, they changed that, and so now counties can have charters, okay? Used to be just cities had charters, and the thought was, well, the city provides municipal services, it's a municipality, it needs that where they can have specific rights and specific duties and specific powers under the charter. Now, as of the 68 Constitution, the county could have charters, okay? A charter, again, is your little mini constitution. It says what the government can and can't do. So right now, for instance, the Madison County does not have a charter, but could if people in Madison County decided they wanted to. There's various things that can be done with charters. Charters can, right now, they can create and abolish positions, create and abolish elected positions. So right now you could say, the charter could say that the supervisor of election is going to be an appointed position, right, instead of an elected position. It could say it's going to be elected, but it'll all be nonpartisan instead of partisan. It could do it any way that the voters of Madison County vote that in. It could provide for salaries, right? It could provide for all these types of things. Well, what this provision is doing is it is taking away the ability of the county through a charter to change the status of the county constitutional officers, which are the sheriff, tax collector, property appraiser, supervisor, election, and clerk of the court. It's saying you can't change that with a charter. Those are going to still be elected even whether you have a charter or not. Does that make sense? Now, I don't really think, I think Jacksonville doesn't have an elected sheriff, I think, because they're that consolidated thing. I think that's one. I think Miami-Dade may not have an elected supervisor.
Yeah, it's appointed,
Appointed supervisor, but there are only 2 or 3 counties where that's even an issue, you know.
and Jacksonville has term limits.
And Jacksonville is turning, that's right. And that would affect that. But anyway, that's where that's coming from. And I'm sorry, I know I had to kind of tell you a book there to get you there, but that's where that is. So, wait a minute, is that the end of it?
So if all that's left like it is, none of that can be appointed.
Well, let me, if amendment number 10 passes, right, it's gonna change the date on the start of the legislative session. It's gonna create, under the Constitution, this Office of Domestic Security and Counterterrorism on page 33. It's gonna require the legislature to have a Department of Veterans Affairs on page 34. And it's gonna take away the ability of a county charter to change how the constitutional officers are appointed or elected. Okay, so that's if it passes. If it doesn't pass, all that stays the way it is. The legislature has to start, whenever they start now, in March. If it doesn't pass, Office of Domestic Security and Counterterrorism is not in the Constitution, right? The Veterans Affairs is a may instead of a shall, and the county charter can change those offices. Does that make sense? All right. All right, number 11.
There is a little more on page 37.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. There's exceptions. Okay, in this selection and duty of county officers, except provided in this subsection, the amendment to section 1 of the article relating to duties shall take effect on January 5, 2021, shall govern qualifying, et cetera. So that's saying when it takes effect. Number 2, Miami-Dade and Broward. The amendment of section 1 of this article relating to section of county officers shall take effect. All right, so that's just the dates it takes effect, you know, when you phase it. Thank you, though, I had not seen that. Okay, Article 11. This has 3 different parts, and again, it's a little, you don't really know why they grouped them this way, but the first one, in Declaration of Rights, basic rights, right? So this is all natural persons, male and female, are equal before the law, have inalienable rights, all of that. This is at the beginning, and it's kind of like the Bill of Rights in the United States Constitution. It sets out those types of rights. The part, though, if you look at what's stricken, it says, except that the ownership, inheritance, disposition, and possession of real property by aliens ineligible for citizenship may be regulated or prohibited by law. Now, that was put in there, and I heard about this, but I don't know that exactly. That was put in, I believe, during the Great Florida Land Boom, when, so that was the 20s, because they were worried about people from other countries coming in and buying property, et cetera, et cetera. To my knowledge, there has never been, though, a statute that regulated or prohibited aliens from owning property in Florida. I don't think that is a real issue at this point, but they proposed taking it out. I don't know the answer to this. I think it would certainly be questionable as to whether you could do that under the federal Constitution. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask a question. Wasn't there a point in our history, a few years back, where they wanted to vote on turning over the turnpike to a foreign entity, to allow a foreign entity to buy the turnpike from the state? And that went to a vote, and people were outraged about that.
Yeah. I'm unfamiliar with that. That sounds very interesting. But no, I don't know. Okay, so that's Article 1. Now move on to Article 10. And this one is is a lot bigger than it looks. It says repeal of criminal statutes. Now it says repeal or amendment of a criminal statute shall not affect prosecution. Well, what it used to say was, shall not affect prosecution or punishment for any crime previously committed before such repeal, right? What the change is, they're taking out the word punishment. So, if you're convicted of crime A, right, at that time, the punishment was 20 years in jail or prison. And then later, they change that statute, they repeal it or whatever, you can go back and it would be possible for the legislature to set it up where your penalty could be changed, right? So what was a crime today has a 20-year statute. If this passes, the legislature would be able to pass a statute that says if that statute's repealed, they can either let you out or lower your sentence. Now and I don't have any way to know this, what they say that is aimed toward is groups feel like that they are about to pass the marijuana, legalizing marijuana. And so the thought is that if you have this, then people who are serving time for trafficking or using marijuana, once you make it legal, then those sentences can be reduced or eliminated. Okay, those people can be let out. That's what I understand, but anyway, that's the point of that is you can't, it says you can't affect the prosecution, but when you delete the word punishment, you would be able to affect the punishment, and you'd probably be able to reduce sentences or let people out. And frankly, I don't know that the legislature's repealed the criminal law since I've been practicing law. I mean, they add them every year, but they don't repeal them. That marijuana, I think, would probably be the only one that would fit. Huh?
That's what Canada did
Yeah.
yesterday. Just let everybody out there.
Is that Amendment 12?
That's amendment number 11. That's the second part of amendment 11. So the first part is that on the ownership and inheritance by aliens.
Aliens.
And the second part is that one that we were just talking about. The third part is just repealing that high-speed rail system they put into the Constitution in 2003. Remember, that's the one with Governor Scott,
Has that already been done, or is that part of this?
That's part of this. So if amendment number 11 passes, we're going to delete the part about the legislature can regulate or prohibit the ownership of property by aliens. We're going to change that repeal of criminal statutes provision so that the legislature could change sentences for people already convicted if the crime is repealed. And then number 3 would be repeal that whole provision about high-speed rail. All right, so that's number 11. Home stretch. We've got now number 12. Now this one, unlike the last several, actually, is reasonably related to the whole thing's kind of interrelated. This was dealing with lobbying and abuse of office by public officials. The thought here is that when people, or what it's trying to guard against, is that as people getting elected to high office, meaning the legislature or cabinet position, and at the state level, spending a few years, they get out of that position, and then they immediately go to a lobbying firm and start lobbying the people they had hired, basically, and asking them and lobbying them on behalf of well-heeled, well-paying clients, right? And so the thought here is we're going to stop that, and they're not going to be able to do that. And that's really the whole thing. Now, we already have statutes that prohibit that. I don't know that they prohibit it quite this drastically, but they do prohibit it. So I think we're at where the meat of it starts. If you get on page 41, paren 2, no public officer, a public officer shall not lobby for compensation on issues of policy, appropriations, procurement, before the federal government, legislature, any state government body, agency, or any political subdivision. Now what that means is, that's saying a public officer shall not. So while I'm elected as a member of the legislature, I can't go lobby the Attorney General's office. While I'm elected as a county commissioner, I can't go lobby the school board, right? Now that is, now that's not quite as big an issue here in Madison, obviously. But in some of these big counties, you really do have lobbyists for the county commission and the school board. They have millions and millions of dollars at stake. Now what it doesn't mean is, I would be able to, if I was a county commissioner and I wanted to go to the legislature and say, hey, we need money for my county, you know, I can still do that. But I can't do it for pay. I can't do that for a private client. That's the point of that. All right, so number 3. A public officer shall not lobby for compensation on issues of policy, appropriations, or procurement for a period of 6 years after vacation of the public position as follows. So if you get beat in county commission race, you get beat in the legislature, you quit or whatever, for 6 years, you can't do this. So, A statewide elected officer or member of the legislature shall not lobby the legislature or any state government body or agency. So if you're the governor, attorney general, member of the legislature, you can't lobby DEP, you can't lobby any of those, DOT, any of those entities. You can lobby counties, you can lobby school boards, special districts, whatever. B, a person serving as a secretary and executive director or other head of a department of the executive branch of state government shall not lobby the legislature. Okay, so if you got the executive director of DOT, executive director of DOR, executive director of DEP, they can't lobby the legislature, the governor, the executive officer of the governor, members of the cabinet, a department that is headed by a member of the cabinet, or his or her former department. So that's pretty extensive.
It's kind of like utilizing ethics, right?
Wow. It's prohibiting unethical behavior, yeah. So anyway, now this is, now if you go to C on the page 42, a county commissioner, a county officer pursuant to Article 8, which is clerk of the court, tax collector, all those, or county charter, school board member, superintendent of schools, elected municipal officer, or an elected special district officer in a special district with ad valorem taxing authority, shall not lobby his or her former agency or governing body. So that one applies. If you're a county commissioner, you can't lobby the county. If you're a school board member, you can't lobby the school board, but you can lobby everybody else. This subsection shall not be construed to prohibit a public officer from carrying out the duties of his or her public office. So that's what I'm saying. A county commissioner could still go to the legislature and say, hey, we need money for Madison County. Can y'all, support this project for Madison County?
But what if they're running, for re-election? Does this legislative, rules apply to them?
Yeah, okay, if they're running for re-election, right?
Mhm.
They can always, whether they're running or not, while they're in office, they can always go to the legislature and say, I want to lobby you for my county, right? So if I'm a county commissioner, I can say, I want to lobby you and get good stuff for my county. That's fine, because the county can't pay them anymore. That's not a for-profit kind of thing. If you're, so you can always do that, but you can, whether you're running or not, you can't have a client that you're lobbying someone for. So I couldn't be a county commissioner in Madison and then also have it be lobbying on behalf of Exxon Oil, the legislature, right? So I can't do that anyway. And then that applies while I'm in office. Once I'm out of office, it's not quite that strict. I can't lobby the county. If I'm a county commissioner, I can't lobby the county, but I could lobby other local entities. I could lobby the legislature. I could lobby the governor's office, all that.
Okay, so the 6 years don't apply when it comes to that?
The 6 years only applies to my one agency.
To the county?
That's right.
Okay.
Now, if I'm a member of the legislature, and I think this is really more aimed at members of the legislature and all that. So if I'm a member of the legislature for 6 years, I can't lobby the state, basically. I can't lobby the legislative branch or the executive branch. All right. Now, number 2, and this again on page 42, public officer or public employee. So now, remember, that's a little different now, because before it was public officers, it was people elected, all this. This is a public officer or public employee. Theoretically, the term public employee would include a school bus driver, secretary, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, a public officer or public employee shall not abuse his or her public position in order to obtain a disproportionate benefit for himself or herself, his or her spouse, children, employer, for any business with which he or she contracts, in which he or she is an officer, partner, director, proprietor, in which he or she owns an interest. The Florida Commission on Ethics shall, by rule, in accordance with statutory procedures governing administrative rulemaking, define the term disproportionate benefit. All right. So why are they saying disproportionate benefit instead of benefit? Right? I work for the county. I'm going and asking that they rezone this part of the county from from ag to commercial. Right? I own property in that, Well, I'm gonna get a benefit of that, right? But the question is, if we're just rezoning a quarter of the county, that's probably not gonna be a disproportionate benefit. I'm gonna get a benefit like everybody else in the county, right? That's what they're talking about, disproportionate benefit. If I go as a county commissioner and say, hey, I would like to have my one little piece of property rezoned, right? Then I have to, number one, recuse myself. I can't vote on it. I also can't, it's not that I just can't vote on it, I can't go behind, and try to talk everybody into it and all that behind the scenes. That would be using your position to get a disproportionate benefit. And there's already a state law on that you can't do that. But this puts it in the Constitution. Okay? Now, starting on page 43, this is dealing with judiciary, and is kind of the same thing, but for the judiciary. It is B, a former justice or former judge shall not lobby for compensation on issue of policy, appropriation, procurement before the legislative or executive branches of state government for a period of 6 years after he vacates his office. So if you were a Supreme, I wouldn't think a county or a circuit judge is going to have any real pull in the legislature. I think it's probably aimed at Supreme Court justices, probably aimed at appellate court judges, that when they retire, they can't immediately go to lobby, right? And then on 44, that just talks about when it's supposed to. So again, this one is kind of, all relates to the same thing. On number 12, if it passes, a public officer can't lobby at all while they're a public officer. And then the public officer, once they cease being a public officer, they can't lobby under those certain conditions for a period of 6 years. A public officer or public employee shall not abuse his or her public position in order to obtain a disproportionate benefit. And the lobbying restrictions also apply to judges and justices. So that's number 12. Any questions? Okay. Last one. This is number 13, and it is dealing with greyhounds. This one is and all commercial dog racing, I guess. If you vote for this, and this is, I guess the only thing you can say about number 13 is it is just dealing with one topic. It's if Amendment 13 passes, it will prohibit greyhound racing by, I think, 2020 is the date.
December 31st.
Yeah, December 31st. So whatever the date is, it will totally prohibit greyhound racing. One of the things, there's a couple things going on here as far as the rest of the story with this amendment. One of the things that's going on is that right now, especially in Dayton and Broward, you have certain establishments that have been traditionally greyhound, right? There's a series of laws right now that say those establishments that are greyhound, highlight, etc., that as long as they continue doing that, those establishments are allowed to have slot machines, right? Slot machines are where you make apparently a flat ton of money. And that's what they want to do. They want to have those slot machines, right? But right now they have to have, in order to have the slot machines, they got to have the greyhounds or they got to have the highlight, all that. Greyhound racing is, of those types of things, is apparently one of the more expensive ways to do that. It's a lot more expensive for them to have a greyhound. As you can imagine, you got a big track, you got animals that have to be taken care of, etc. And so that's one of the bad things